with a particular reference to labor, agriculture, natural resources, public finance, education, and the history of economic thought, the very wide ranging academic disciplines. He's also the founding member, one of the founding members of the Agrarian South Network and a founding editor of the journal Agrarian South, Journal of Political Economy. And Professor Jha's latest book is Labor in Contemporary India. So Professor Jha, welcome. And I wanted, there's a range of issues I'm sure you could speak on, but I wanted to just ask you in terms of the political responses to the issues related to and the crisis of landlessness. And, you know, how does the development model of the global South affect land and livelihood rights? So within that broad context, please go ahead, Professor Jha. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, esteemed Melunji, and organizers for including me in this conversation. I will stick to the core theme that the Chair has outlined for me, but I'll simply reverse the order in terms of the two connected themes that we have there. So, talking at the global level, and I'll come to the India story in my second slot, but at the global level, the first extremely important issue which needs to be recognized is that for the global South, the idea that global South can emulate what happened in the global North is completely sort of, off the track. It's barking up the wrong tree. This is something which is not doable, not feasible, and so on, for a variety of reasons for which we can't really get into all the details here. But basically, the centrality of land-related activities, petty production, etc., even in a narrow sense of its functionality, its sustainability, etc., is absolutely important. So if somebody tells us that, look, global North managed to get out of agriculture, is the population dependent on agriculture is 2%, 3%, or 1%, and so on and so forth. Share in GDP is 1 or 2% or 3%, right? And we can do the same. It's a completely off the mark kind of thing, right? That's the first very important kind of issue which needs to be recognized. Let's say if we look at in the context of developing countries, and China is supposed to be the country which has outdone any other let's say development experience. In fact, it has outdone many of the developed countries in terms of their performance over a period of time, their structural transformation and so on. But look at China. Look at the dependence on agriculture there, the dependence on land and petty production and so on. And that is something which is not going to disappear in certainly the foreseeable future. Right? What happens after 50 years, we don't know, but whether the world will survive is a different issue. But that's the first very important point which we need to take note of. That is, global South cannot emulate, even in a narrow sense of development trajectory and so on, what happened in the global North. Whether it is desirable, that opens up a whole range of other issues, the questions of sustainability, what is happening to planet Earth, and etc. I will not get into those questions right now. The second related theme that the chair wanted me to reflect on is the political responses. Unfortunately, as it happens, from the top, the response has been a complete disaster. That is, I'm talking of the elites in each one of these countries, in global South and so on. Every once in a while, you have a committee being set up. In that short video which you saw, Ekta Parishad is a party to committee formation. A document was signed, and it was completely dishonored. right? I mean, in fact, the committee gave its report and etc. And for 5 years, the government of the day, which certainly was a slightly more sensitive government to the government that India has currently, yeah, but it had no time even to look at the document. So that's one example of the political response from the top. And when I say top, I am referring to the entire range of institutions at the top. These include institutions which are part of the UN system. Just now, a particular reference was made to the UN Declaration on the Rights of Peasants and other people working in rural areas. We can think of a number of other initiatives which have been taken in the past, again through the UN institutions. So, for instance, voluntary guidelines on responsible governance of tenure of lands, fisheries, and forests, and so on. Again, I mean, what do you notice? That most of these are not respected almost at all. There's a lot of talk, but there is very little kind of attempt to pay any heed to its core messages and so on. As regards the national elites, fewer sort of, so, you know, I don't know, one does not want to be extremely dismissive, but I would say that the disappointments are really large. Yeah. And the kind of policies that we have pursued everywhere, largely we are talking of a neoliberal context in which is the interest of the capital which comes at the center, and a whole range of policies which get into motion are anything but to respect what is required in terms of a degree of care and sensitivity to the peasantry, to the people who are at the bottom of the pyramid, and so on and so forth. And as the chair mentioned, we are actually talking about a huge population. We are talking about at least 2.5 billion people worldwide who are smallholder agriculture. That's a huge population that we are talking about, right? If we add to that landless workers, right, and various other categories, which again was mentioned in terms of people working in other related petty production activities, right, whether it is fisheries and other areas, we really are talking of almost half the global population, right? And just leaving them to a terrible logic of untrammeled neoliberal market forces is something which is the worst kind of political response that we can think of. Right? And this is something which we have seen, especially in the last few years, becoming worse, last 30 years or so. But even in the last couple of decades, last decade and so on, the range of things which have been done to them through a whole range of policies. So reports tell us that land inequalities are increasing very rapidly in almost every country in the global south. The extent of inequalities are very high, and the pace at which the inequalities are rising is becoming absolutely disastrous. So how do we deal with all these issues? Now, as we know...
Professor Jha, can I just ask you to sum up? You'll have another round in a few minutes.
Yeah, sure. So 1 minute, Chair, is that okay?
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So basically, what is that the whole vulnerability on the land question and entire petty production in general, all that is worsening, as we know, that is at the center of the well-being for the masses in general in the global south. And secondly, almost every other important indicator of their well-being is connected with land. So, the economic geography is something which is absolutely important to understand in terms of looking at land as being at its center in all these countries. Right? But along with that, and this is the last point in my opening remarks, there is a social geography which is extremely important to keep in mind when understanding and analyzing economic geography, which is where the questions of gender, questions of race, questions of caste, and a whole lot of other very important divisions do matter. With that, Chair, let me stop here. Thank you for the time.
Okay, thanks very much. That was a very, very important opening remarks. I'm going to move to the next speaker. I will try to summarize the main points, but we're asking similar questions to the speaker. So the next speaker is Mr. Ardo So. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. A land activist from Senegal. He's currently in charge of land advocacy at Enda Pronat, Senegal, and a founding member of the Ndial Collective. It's a pastoral area in the north of Senegal where an Italian company had obtained 20,000 hectares following a decree of declassification, and Mr. Sow participated in a major struggle against this investor and the Senegalese government. And they continue to, his Endo Pronat team continues to support the collective. He's a very well-known activist who supports victims of land grabbings. He's set up, I think, almost 25 collectives, and is participating in a range of efforts on land reform. And he's also run for the municipal elections in Senegal in 2014. And at present, he's a municipal councillor and member of the land commission. So, Ardo, welcome. I wanted to ask you similar question to Professor Jha. How does the current, what is the level of the current political support? And the sort of related denial of rights of the landless and homeless poor in Senegal. But you can speak about Africa as a whole if you want. So you have 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Okay, merci beaucoup, Mr. Milun. Well, so I'm going to speak in French. I will feel better in French.
That's fine, yeah.
So, voilà, moi je reviens un peu sur, je vais rebondir un peu sur ce que mon prédécesseur avait expliqué tout à l'heure. Donc, si on regarde bien aujourd'hui, partout dans le monde, comme il a dit, il y a beaucoup de violations, surtout par rapport à l'accès aux ressources naturelles en général. Moi, je dirais par rapport à l'accès aux ressources naturelles en général, que ce soit sur le foncier, que ce soit sur la forêt, que ce soit sur l'eau. Donc, c'est devenu un enjeu, surtout aujourd'hui que le continent africain est présenté aujourd'hui comme un continent où plus de 60% des terres arables sont actuellement. Donc, mais avec une réduction progressive de cette assiette foncière, on regarde aujourd'hui, on parlait de 60%. Il y a la dégradation, il y a la salinisation, l'acidification, mais aussi dans tout ça avec une forte croissance démographique dans le continent, un peu partout. Je pense qu'il y a même des présidents qui ont fait référence à ça. Donc, avec un taux d'urbanisation de plus de 46% dans certains pays, particulièrement au Sénégal. Donc, du coup, on a plusieurs défis dans les pays africains. Un défi d'aller vers des systèmes de production alimentaire alliant performance économique, sociale et environnementale. Donc, ça, c'est un des défis. L'autre défi, c'est l'emploi des jeunes. Avec une population essentiellement jeune. Donc, si on regarde aujourd'hui la population africaine, dans le monde, c'est la population la plus jeune, et où il faut faire face à l'exode rural, face à l'immigration clandestine, mais aussi à l'investissement dans le monde rural. Donc, on doit encourager. Donc, le défi, c'est d'encourager nos gouvernements à investir plus dans le monde rural. Donc, l'autre défi, c'est une transition démographique avec la réduction de la pauvreté en milieu rural. Donc, tous ces défis conjugués, il y a aujourd'hui une politique au niveau international qui pousse les pays africains à lutter contre ça. Donc, la lutte contre l'insécurité alimentaire avec différents programmes qui ont été mis en place, avec la Peñazane, beaucoup de programmes qui ont été mis en place par les institutions internationales, la lutte contre les changements climatiques et aussi la lutte contre l'immigration clandestine des jeunes. Donc, du coup, il y a beaucoup de cas d'accaparement des terres aujourd'hui dans les pays africains, que ce soit au Sénégal, que ce soit au Mali, que ce soit au Burkina Faso, en Côte d'Ivoire et même partout dans les pays africains. Il y a une ruée massive sur ces terres africaines, donc, parce qu'il y a un appel pour l'investissement étranger. Et aujourd'hui, ça a quel impact? Donc, ça impacte l'économie rurale. Et l'économie rurale, c'est quoi? C'est l'agriculture. L'économie rurale, c'est l'élevage. Et un élevage qui est différent de l'élevage qui est pratiqué dans les autres pays européens. Donc, c'est le pastoralisme. Donc, des gens qui ont leurs animaux qui sont obligés de se déplacer d'un point à un autre pour trouver l'eau, pour trouver le fourrage, donc pour trouver tout ça. Et c'est des terres qui sont partagées. Donc, c'est toutes les communautés qui ont accès à ces terres. Donc, ce qu'on voit aujourd'hui, c'est que de plus en plus, avec l'arrivée de ces investisseurs, tant au niveau international et même au niveau national, il y en a qui disent que la traduction ne fonctionne pas. Donc, l'arrivée de ces investisseurs au niveau national comme au niveau international, c'est la ruée vers ces terres. Donc, de plus en plus, ces espaces sont en train de se rétrécir. Donc, si je prends par exemple l'exemple du Sénégal, si on parle de comment aujourd'hui, parmi les lois dans les différents pays, que ce soit au Mali ou bien même au Cameroun, où on parle de domaine national, c'est la seule loi où aujourd'hui on dit que 95% des terres du Sénégal appartiennent à la nation sénégalaise. Donc du coup, il est très difficile pour un investisseur étranger d'accéder directement à des terres sans passer par les autorités. Donc il y a beaucoup de magouilles tout autour pour faciliter cet accès. Mais c'est en train de se passer, ou bien c'est le président de la République qui signe un décret. Je donne l'exemple avec la forêt de Gaël, qui était de 46 000 hectares, où le président Abdoulaye Wade, en 2012, a signé un décret pour affecter 20 000 hectares à une entreprise italienne, alors que c'était une zone de refuge pour tous les éleveurs qui étaient dans le delta du fleuve Sénégal. Parce qu'une autre partie de cette zone a été utilisée pour l'expérimentation de la riziculture. Donc, du coup, tous les éleveurs étaient obligés d'aller vers cette zone. C'était une zone de refuge. Donc, si on donnait cette zone à ces investisseurs italiens, où il y avait plus de 37 villages, tous des éleveurs, l'objectif, c'était qu'ils se déplacent ou bien de les reloger ailleurs. Donc, si on laissait ça continuer, ça allait faire. Donc, du coup, le combat a déclenché comme ça. Donc, aujourd'hui, je peux partager, par exemple, mon écran avec un cas sur lequel on a travaillé. C'est le cas de Dodel, qui est un cas.
Although you have like one more minute, so perhaps do you want to do that in the next round when you have more time?
So I will try to do that in the next round. So.
Okay.
Donc, ce que je voulais dire, c'est que il y a toujours cette pression au niveau international qui fait qu'il y a la ruée des investisseurs sur les terres africaines et aussi les investisseurs au niveau local avec ces différentes politiques qui encouragent l'investissement dans l'agriculture et les différentes politiques aussi qui encouragent les réformes foncières qui permettent de privatiser les terres. Donc ça, c'est devenu problématique. Du coup, si vous regardez bien, dans tous les pays africains, ou bien en tout cas la majorité, il y a des processus de réforme foncière qui sont enclenchés, que ce soit au Sénégal, que ce soit au Mali, que ce soit au Burkina Faso. Bref, dans tous les pays africains, il y a des réformes qui sont enclenchées. Donc, pourquoi? Pour la course vers des points sur le doing business. Donc, du coup, ça, c'est un impact que les producteurs au niveau du monde rural sont en train de subir aujourd'hui. Et il y a beaucoup, c'est en train de détruire la manière de vivre des populations du monde rural, surtout les éleveurs qui avaient l'habitude d'occuper des espaces étendus, mais chaque éleveur ou bien chaque acteur du monde rural pourrait venir occuper cet espace. Donc aujourd'hui, tout ça, c'est en train de se dégrader avec l'avancée du front agricole. Donc ces espaces sont en train de se réduire. Donc du coup, ça génère des conflits entre éleveurs et agriculteurs. Ça génère des conflits entre l'administration territoriale et l'administration locales. Donc, du coup, il y a beaucoup de conflits qui sont en train de se générer. Donc, dans la deuxième intervention, je vais revenir avec un cas beaucoup plus concret, où c'est un cas d'accaparement des terres dans des zones au nord du Sénégal, où c'est des cultures de décrue qui sont des cultures communes à toute une communauté, ou bien c'est des zones pastorales qui ont été accaparées par des entreprises. C'est une entreprise marocaine qui avait pris ça. J'ai des cartes ici que je pourrais partager et commenter avec vous. Merci beaucoup.
Thanks very much, Ardo. You will have more time later on. Our next speaker is Ana Cha from is a representative of the Movimento Sem Terra, MST in Brazil, and which is a movement known all over the world, but it's organized in 24 states in 5 regions of the country. And I think that they're working with around 350,000 families who have reconquered their lands. But even after, of course, they have done this radical activity, they remain, of course, there remains threats of reconquest of the land, and as a first step towards the kind of agrarian reform that the government wants to push through. So Anna, I just wanted to ask you, if you can reflect from your grassroots experience on the future of agricultural policy in Latin America in light of the increased grassroots assertions of claims to land and the commons, but in the context of the legal and political developments that have emerged. So you have 5 minutes, Anna. Welcome, and please go ahead.
Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite a todos e todas. Muito obrigada, Milon. Em nome do MST, eu gostaria de agradecer imensamente o convite para participar deste importante webinar, Fórum de Luta pela Terra, com a presença de tantos parceiros do mundo inteiro, e em especial, com carinho, agradecer ao Hector Parichat, com quem temos uma relação já há bastante tempo. Bom, o Movimento Sem Terra do Brasil é um movimento popular de luta pela terra e pela reforma agrária que existe já há 37 anos. A gente faz parte da Via Campesina Internacional e de outras redes internacionais também, como a Assembleia Internacional dos Povos, por exemplo. Então, a gente acredita muito na necessidade desse tipo de articulações internacionais, né, onde a gente possa discutir um futuro comum, onde a gente possa discutir desafios que são comuns também, porque os camponeses do mundo inteiro eles estão ameaçados por esse sistema capitalista, embora com diferenças locais, mas com muitas similaritudes. A gente ouvia aqui o senhor Pravin e a gente ouvir, claro, com todas as diferenças, mas é muito semelhante o contexto que a gente vive no Brasil, por exemplo, e na Índia, e mesmo em vários países da África, como já foi aqui comentado. Talvez vocês estejam acompanhando, e falando mais especificamente do Brasil, o Brasil vive hoje uma realidade muito preocupante. Nós somos uma população de aproximadamente 220 milhões de habitantes e hoje mais da metade dessa população não sabe o que vai comer no dia de amanhã. A gente vive um grau de insegurança alimentar muito grande e desses 19 milhões estão considerados numa situação de fome. Então isso, claro, tudo foi agravado por essa situação da pandemia, mas fundamentalmente é resultado de uma série de políticas de descaso do nosso governo atual, né? Consequência aí, enfim, já de uma série de políticas no campo neoliberal, mas a gente acredita também várias políticas de cunho fascista, inclusive. Então, ao mesmo tempo que a gente vive essa situação de insegurança alimentar, a gente vê que cada vez mais aqueles que produzem o alimento, os camponeses, a população indígena, muitos extrativistas nunca estiveram tão ameaçados. Claro, essa é uma realidade que a gente não pode estender ao todo o continente latino-americano. O continente latino-americano hoje em dia vive uma situação bem diversa, né? Onde a gente tem processos de mobilização popular muito fortes, a gente tem, inclusive, a eleição de vários governos progressistas, o que nos anima, mas a gente tem também alguns países, em especial o caso do Brasil, onde a gente vive uma política genocida em relação à população em geral, e em especial à população do campo. Bom, no caso do Brasil, isso não é uma situação de hoje, né? O Brasil é um dos poucos países que nunca realizou uma reforma agrária, né? Sempre, desde o processo de colonização, a base do seu desenvolvimento foi um modelo agroexportador, né? No início com café, açúcar, mas até hoje com o modelo do agronegócio centrado na produção de commodities para o agronegócio. Então, o Brasil é dos maiores produtores de soja, de gado, de suco de laranja. São bem poucas commodities que são produzidas no país em larga escala para poder ser exportadas. E também é um país que teve um dos maiores êxodos rurais num curto espaço de tempo. Então, na década de 60, 70, mais de 50 milhões de camponeses perderam suas terras e foram do campo para a cidade. Isso faz com que hoje a gente continue com uma taxa de concentração de terra muito, muito grande. Menos de 1% dos proprietários detêm mais de 60% de todas as terras. Isso faz com que hoje, aliados aí a ao capitalismo agrário, a gente tenha uma burguesia rural que controla o poder político e econômico no país, que controla mais da metade do Congresso, que controla os centros de pesquisa, as universidades, os meios de comunicação, que controla, inclusive, todo o discurso que é feito para a sociedade sobre o que seria importante para um modelo de desenvolvimento no campo. Então, para nós, é muito difícil nesse momento, e isso é algo que, né, muitas semelhanças com outras partes do mundo, a gente conseguir construir uma alternativa a esse modelo do agronegócio no campo, né? E isso passaria por quê? Passaria por reconhecer justamente toda essa massa de sem-terra que existem, no caso, no Brasil, né? A gente fala de sem-terra desde aqueles que perderam suas terras, mas a gente fala também dos extrativistas, a gente fala de toda uma quantidade de descendentes, de agregados, de pequenos agricultores, a gente fala de comunidades quilombolas, que seriam comunidades de pessoas ex-escravizadas, né, que não são reconhecidas, e a gente fala também de agricultores que têm propriedades tão pequenas que não garantem o seu sustento. Bom, enquanto MST e enquanto também Via Campesina na América Latina, o que a gente defende? A gente defende a realização de uma reforma agrária que passa por 3 grandes pilares, né? Democratizar as terras, e para democratizar as terras a gente pode pensar em vários mecanismos, né? A gente, enquanto MST, se usa muito da ocupação de terra, mas a ocupação de terra como um mecanismo para fazer acontecer a lei, né? A lei de desapropriação de grandes propriedades que não cumprem a sua função social. No Brasil, a gente tem essa cláusula na lei que nos permite, então, reivindicar isso perante o Estado. A gente acredita que essa reforma agrária ela tem que ser, sim, uma política pública de Estado, ela tem que ter apoio para os camponeses, para os agricultores, para os indígenas poderem produzir a sua subsistência e poderem produzir alimentação para os grandes centros urbanos. E é uma reforma agrária que tem que ter participação popular, não pode ser algo que é feito com uma caneta através de leis. As populações elas têm que se mobilizar para requerer, então, essa democratização e essa desconcentração de terra. Bom, quais são os 3 grandes pilares dessa nossa reforma agrária? A gente acredita que ela tem que produzir alimentação saudáveis com base na agroecologia, com base no respeito à natureza, com base numa apropriação ordenada, racional e controlada pelos camponeses dos recursos naturais. Ela tem que partir da luta por políticas públicas para que as pessoas possam produzir no campo e ter acesso a melhores condições de vida e também condições iguais para a juventude e para as mulheres. no Brasil, na América Latina de uma maneira geral, a luta pela terra
Anna, can I just interrupt? Your time is actually up. Would you mind telling us about the 3 pillars when you speak the next time? Is that okay? I think it's very important. Yeah? Okay. All right. Thanks very much. So I just want to move to the next speaker. It's Ana Maria Suarez Franco. Is from Colombia and has lived in Europe for several decades now, but she's has an LLM degree from the University of Heidelberg and a doctorate from the University of Mannheim, and Anna has done a great deal of work on the justiciability of economic, social, cultural rights, and a great deal of work also on monitoring public policies related to the right to land, and is regularly invited to speak as a guest professor at many different universities, and currently is heading the Food International Action Network office in Geneva, and has been one of the main movers from the international NGO side for the adoption of the Declaration on the Rights of Presence. So it's great to have you here, Anna. I just wanted to actually ask you, in the context of what we've been discussing, that the evolved framing of agrarian reform, the earlier speakers referred to that, how can that be moved towards a more comprehensive assertion of the close and multifaceted relationships between people and their territories, and in particularly related to the right to land and the commons, and this issue that's been coming up all the time of differentiating between access to land and private ownership of land. So also from the political context and your sort of global perspective, you have 5 minutes. Welcome. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Milun, for this question. I think I will be able to answer that in the 2 parts, and I would like to begin explaining in this first part which are the challenges that I see in this struggle for land reform, land redistribution. A bit also answering to the people who spoke, and conversating, dialoguing with those who spoke before, and then maybe in the second part I can come more to the right to land as it is in the UNDROP and the entitlements that I think can be useful to strengthen landless people struggles. I hope that's okay.
That's fine. Yeah.
So first of all, I want to clarify that what we observe at the international level is a very hostile environment, not just here in the human rights system, but also in the European level, but also with others like China or Russia or India. And especially in the case of the European Union, we see a lot of lip work, which means human rights are a good way to exercise colonial practices. But when it comes to the time of truth, to really support the communities, the colonial practices prevail. And these colonial practices, of course, include land and also the denial of the commons. And on the other side, we see that the defense by the governments in the global south is very weak. While the governments are strong for oppression, these authoritarian governments, when it comes to really changing the system in favor of those who have been marginalized, the actions are very weak. And therefore, I think that the struggle that the professor was mentioning on the beginning is the main tool that we have to correct the existing power unbalances in favor of those who are landless. Nonetheless, I want to speak a word in favor of the existing international standards as the UN Declaration on the Rights of Peasants and the guidelines on tenure, because even if they will not replace the needed people's struggles, they provide them with energy. And I have seen that in many countries I have visited to talk to the peasants' movements. They refresh and connect people from different sectors and give some very relevant tools for the negotiations and the struggles vis-a-vis decision makers. And this includes, for example, the right to land, and we will come back to that later, including agrarian reform, which is recognized in the declaration, the recognition of collective rights, which is like the other face of the coin to make the commons really useful for the landless people, and food sovereignty, to mention just some. So this can be very important to upgrade, to defend, to stand up for the rights of people, also because these tools come from peasants, including in peasants, this very diverse group that is also fishers, is also Dalits, is also nomadics, inter alia. Then I also want to identify here three main challenges that I think the struggles have to consider now when thinking on strategies. A big phenomena that we are seeing is the financialization of land and in general of the commons. What does it mean? It means that land is not this good that belongs to the people to ensure their lives, their spiritual, cultural, and social values, but has become, for some powerful sectors in the world society, a commodity with which they negotiate in the stock markets, really fragmenting, dividing the people that live in the land from what they do with the land in these financial markets. And of course, this means that the land prices increase, and then young women and men cannot access to the land, but also that people who had the land are expelled from it. And in Europe, to speak from the perspective of the region I am representing, there is a lot of talk about share deals. That's to say that people do not buy now the land as such, but they buy companies that own the land. And this way makes that all the mechanisms that we have worked for from the agrarian reform point of view do not work anymore. And we have to rethink how to answer to this rogue capitalism. The second challenge is the digitalization of land. The big digital powers in complicity with the big agri-food corporations are identifying the good lands that they will buy, but also reorganizing the registers of land through digital registration. And we have the case of Mirador Estate Park in Brazil, where agribusinesses companies have illegally encroached into 700,000 hectare conservation area using digital land registries, dispossessing hundreds of families from land where they have been living for generations. The last challenge is what we call the multi-stakeholder governance and the public-private partnerships. This put rural movements who are discussing on land, on access, control, management on land, in spaces as if they would be the same, have the same aims, have the same interests, and have the same nature. But of course, these multi-stakeholder initiatives are initiatives that happen in a frame of power and balances, which means that at the end, it is not the will of the people from civil society and social movements. It's not the will of the governments in case they have a good will to defend the public, but it is the will of these powerful corporations that want the land, which is doing the law and is doing it to defend their private interest. This model is the framework of the phenomena that you described very well in the concept note of this conversation, which tends to make the people, the peasants, rural workers, and eliminates their autonomy and their food sovereignty. So these are the challenges, and we have to think how to renew our struggles to face these new ways in which people are impeded to access land or dispossessed of the land that they have.
Okay, thanks very much, Anna. It was very concise. You will have 5 more minutes. So I want to go to our last speaker for this first round, Ramesh Sharma, who's the National Coordinator of Ekta Parishad. We all saw the video before, and I think the work of Ekta Parishad is known all over the world. Ramesh has been, I think, for almost 20 years now, the national coordinator, but has made some amazing alliances with peasants movements across the world. So it's a great honor. Ramesh, if you would like to, I don't have a specific question for you, but I think perhaps you can reflect on what you've been hearing this last 40 minutes and 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Mulin. There is a poor connectivity here, so sorry, I have not started my video, but I think I'm audible enough. So, Milunji, first, I actually want to congratulate all the brilliant speakers for their views and very, very, very interesting, but at the same time, very depressing picture that whatever we have listened from Africa, Latin America, or from the European or Indian context. The first, which is quite clear here, that there's a non-recognition of international framework or the national laws itself. What Professor Jha has spoken, that we are known for one of the best international frameworks like UNDROP or VGTT or a few others. But if you see the country level ratification or implementation of all those international frameworks, we are really in a very backward situation, which is a larger disappointment, the reason of the larger disappointment for almost half of the global population, what he spoke. So this is the reality of the land reforms, and this is the level of political resistance or the institutional challenges we are actually witnessing today in the different parts of the world. Of course, the land inequality, what Anna said, Anna Cha has spoken about the Brazilian situation, that in spite of a very powerful movement like MST in Brazil, the land reform is still an unfinished agenda for almost like half of the population who are waiting. And as she explained very rightly, that the people who don't know that whether they are really capable to grow their next food or their next meal or not. So this is the level of challenge which we are seeing here in India as well as in Brazil. But what Urdu has spoken here was really, really very interesting for me, that how the growing urbanization setting a huge amount of challenge, especially for those large population in Senegal or an African continent who are dependent on land and commons. So you can see the similar phenomena across the world, that how because of the urbanization, we are losing more and more agricultural land as well as the commons land across the world. So this is going to be a new sorts of challenge in the future. And what Anna Maria has just spoken, that the whole process of digital land registration, and in the name of digitalization and computerization, how we are actually transferred the huge amount of land-related database for the free market. So, I mean, the African continent, the Asian continent, because we are the one which is known for the highest rate of urbanization and there is estimates that the half of the population from the global south will shift it to the big cities by 2050 or 2060. So this is going to be a huge challenge and crisis for us, which is very clear from the presentation from Anna Maria. Of course, what Anna said in her last point, that this is also a major challenge for the autonomy over the food sovereignty. I mean, this is a very special year when the large number of organizations and UN itself, it's actually celebrating the UN summit on food security and nutritional security, and a lot of discussion about the food and food systems. But what we have actually witnessed over last few decades or the few years, and especially after the COVID, that how state itself is a major reason for depriving a large number of people to be dependent on the corrupt and fragile state. So if you remember on the other day, I have spoken to you that this is going to be a huge challenge for a large sum of population who want to be a self-dependent, who want to grow something, who want to do family farming, who are the landless poor and waiting for their land reforms. So let me stop here, Milunji, and thanks for giving me this chance.
Yeah, thanks very much, Rameshji. So we will move to the second round of questions. I think there are some very, very important issues that have been raised, particularly in the context of Professor Jha. You were raising, the question of that the South cannot and must not, in fact, emulate the practices of the North, which has moved away from land-based economies. I just wanted to ask you in that context. So, what needs to be done so that we can get, progressive rights-based land reform on track, and how can this kind of agrarian and land reform set an agenda for to achieve the social political goal of a just society that is free from hunger? We heard about the great amount of hunger and people faced with starvation in Brazil, but also in India, and sort of how can we move to a ecosystem for marginalized communities that is free from sustainable ecosystem that is free from violence. So, and whatever else you'd like to say, you've seen the trend of the discussions in your next 5 minutes. Professor Jha, please.
First of all, express my gratitude to all the preceding speakers, including you, Milun, in terms of very sort of sharply focusing on some of the challenges and concerns that we deal with. And as regards the question that you have put to me for this round, I mean, it's the most profound question. How can we, at the end of the day, it's a political question. But with reference to sort of the economic architecture and so on, the first most important thing is to reject the contemporary model of neoliberal globalization. Because unless that is done, we just can't move forward. Anna Maria, I share your optimism. I am a great admirer of Antonio Gramsci, and Gramsci's sort of pessimism of intellect and optimism of will, right? I mean, is something which is a very important provision. Look at all these, UN has become a talking shop. It kind of keeps making all kinds of declarations which are not binding, which are always voluntary. And look at all the other treaties that we get, WTO, which becomes a binding thing, right? Then what do? I mean, this is a very strange kind of thing at the international level, which we have to keep in mind. Yes, it energizes people from below, from movements from below, and all that is most welcome. So I am completely with you on that. But this huge kind of chasm that we have to confront, right? I mean, as per the most recent stats, as we know, currently there are approximately 608 million farms in the world, right? and almost 80% are small farms. But 1% of farms operate more than 70% of world's farmland, right? And then, in addition to that, the capture that they have legally, illegally, in many other ways, somewhere in the middle zone and so on and so forth. The example that you gave from Brazil, etc., of grabs of various kinds, etc., of the commons, other resources, water, and so on and so forth. In a book which we did 2 years ago, this is with the late Sam Moyo and my very good friend Paris Yoris. It's called Reclaiming Africa, where we had focused on the grab of not only land, but all the commons and various other resources which are going on, and how to resist that politically. So the starting point has to be sort of to this very, very important political initiative to build a very powerful coalition against neoliberal kind of globalization and so on. So that will have to be the most important question that we keep in mind. With reference to, again, UN's Declaration Rights of Peasants and Other People, it was amazing to see the response and the refusal of US and UK, amongst many other countries, who voted against the adoption of this particular provision on the grounds that peasants did not exist as a distinct population. I mean, what are we talking about? How bizarre can we get, right? And you named the countries. I mean, there's so many of these powerful countries which are part of this particular game. So the real challenge is how to build a political kind of coalition, alliance, focusing on very, very clearly putting petty production and smallholders, landless people at the center of this entire alliance. I think that will have to be the most important concern. We know, I mean, if I come to India, for instance, Ramesh talked about it, how in terms of provisions and laws, we might have many good things, but just look at what is happening on the ground. And currently, almost 50% of India's rural households are landless. If we look at as of 2016, and compare that with 1998, there has been an increase in landlessness during this period of approximately 10% of rural households who became additionally landless. Right? So we can talk about all the numbers, but I don't think I need to get too much into these details. But I think it's extremely important to look at all the other questions relating to how to build this political coalition and each one of these different groups. Yeah, I mean, in case of India, we are really talking of 85% of farmers being marginal and small, and if you add the landless to that, essentially we are talking of almost the entire countryside. So that's the kind of situation which we have and that we need to deal with. And let me just make one last point. The land is a gift of nature. All these natural resources are a gift of nature. I mean, this is absolutely imperative that we have to make a very strong, very powerful claim that these are the commons. These were the commons. They got sort of part of the accumulation trajectories and strategies, etc., as capitalism progressed, but these must be reclaimed. So the centrality of commons is something which should be part of this political struggle that we are talking about. And specifically, since the gender question has been flagged in the note, if you look at the dependence of women vis-a-vis the entire social reproduction of the household on whatever remains of the commons, which is just a little bit now, has got reduced considerably. It's huge. You really kind of, in terms of foraging, collecting, etc. Yeah, I mean, this provides very, very important and significant component of the overall social reproduction basket. So that kind of centrality of commons again needs to be highlighted as part of the broader struggles. And I think with that, probably I have finished my allotted time. So thank you. Thank you very
Thanks very
much.
much, Raja. That's very important points. And there will be another opportunity. We have a short discussion segment. So I want to move to Ardo. You know, you talked about the massive issue of migration in Africa. And what I wanted to ask you was, I think it would be important to discuss the impacts. So when we speak about this large scale sort of levels of landlessness, what is the impact on pastoral communities? What is the impact on women, as Professor Jayas pointed out, the specific impact? So if you can spend some minutes from your experience on the human rights impacts, the social impacts, that would be very, very helpful. Go ahead, Ardo.
Bon, merci beaucoup. C'est bon pour le micro? Voilà, c'est bon. Merci beaucoup. Donc, comme je le disais tout à l'heure, il y a pas mal d'impact aujourd'hui sur le pastoralisme, que ce soit sur le pastoralisme, que ce soit sur l'agriculture, l'agro-pastoralisme, que ce soit sur l'accès aux mares, l'accès aux rivières. Il y a de grands impacts. Si je donne l'exemple, par exemple, au nord du Sénégal, avec cette entreprise marocaine qui avait obtenu 10 000 hectares, et sur les 10 000 hectares, c'était sur des zones de culture de décrue, donc une manière traditionnelle d'exploiter les terres. Donc, avec le remplissage du fleuve Sénégal qui s'étendait, le retrait des crues, la population avait la possibilité de cultiver le sorgho qui leur servait de consommation pendant presque la moitié de l'année ou bien autour de 8 mois. Et l'installation de cette entreprise allait impacter sur ces cultures de décrue où les gens n'auraient plus accès à ces zones de culture de décrue. Ils allaient impacter aussi, occuper les grandes mares qui sont des mares avec le remplissage du fleuve Sénégal. C'est des poissons qu'on trouve là-bas pendant presque la moitié de l'année aussi. Et les parcours de bétail. Si la zone est divisée en deux parties, une zone du Djeri où c'est presque après l'hivernage, il n'y a pas de point d'eau. Donc, tous les animaux sont obligés d'aller vers les grandes mares, sont obligés d'aller vers les grands cours d'eau pour avoir de l'eau, pour avoir du pâturage. Ils allaient occuper tout cet espace, fermer les parcours de bétail. Donc, ce qu'on a vu, c'est 78% même de ces agro-industries interrogées qu'on a vu, ils exportent la majorité de leur production. Et la majorité des villages, des sites aux alentours, donc au-delà, on a la compagnie sucrière, on a d'autres villages qui sont là-bas. C'est des villages qui souffrent d'un plus grand taux d'insécurité alimentaire. Donc, certes, ces agro-industries contribuent au rééquilibrage de la balance commerciale par rapport aux exonérations, mais aussi l'exonération du matériel exporté. Mais n'empêche, ces entreprises sont obligées aujourd'hui. Il y a beaucoup qui ont contourné la loi, la réglementation pour profiter. Il y a des entreprises qu'on a attrapées qui ont été obligées de transiger. Donc ça, c'est un manque à gagner au niveau de l'État du Sénégal. Et si on parle aujourd'hui de la promotion de l'emploi, si on voit aujourd'hui qu'il y a des entreprises qui sont en train de s'installer, mais chaque année, c'est des milliers de jeunes qui prennent les pirogues pour aller en Espagne. C'est des milliers de jeunes qui prennent les pirogues pour aller en France. De jeunes de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, du Sénégal, du Mali, de la Guinée, qui sont en train de mourir par milliers dans les fonds marins méditerranéens ou bien atlantiques. Pourtant, il y a des entreprises qui sont en train de s'installer. Pourquoi? Parce que ce qu'ils promettent, ce qu'ils disent, au finish, ce n'est pas ce qu'on voit. Quel emploi qu'est-ce qu'on promet? C'est des ouvriers agricoles. Mais au finish, on a besoin de plus que ça. Et en tant que société civile, Qu'est-ce qu'on a fait? Qu'est-ce qu'on est en train de faire? Donc, organiser les populations en collectif, ça c'est quelque chose qu'on a fait, mais aussi la diaspora, puisqu'aussi on est dans une zone où on a beaucoup d'expatriés au niveau de l'Europe, au biais des États-Unis, c'est de les organiser et aussi d'organiser la société civile, tant au niveau du Sénégal, par exemple, au niveau du Mali, mais aussi au niveau de la sous-région avec la convergence globale de lutte contre l'accaparement des terres, de l'eau et des semences. Parce que quand on parle d'accaparement des terres, le bien commun, la terre, mais aussi le bien commun, c'est l'eau. Les rivières, les fleuves, c'est des biens communs où les gens peuvent avoir accès pour faire l'agriculture, où les gens peuvent avoir accès pour faire l'élevage, ou bien pour boire, ou bien même pour la pêche. Donc, tout ça, c'est des choses. Donc, aujourd'hui, ce qui est en train d'être fait, c'est de les mettre en rapport avec des huissiers. Et aujourd'hui, ce cas dont je parle, avec 10 000 hectares, après les mobilisations, l'apport, ils ont réussi auprès de la Cour, au niveau de la Cour suprême, à obtenir gain de cause. Donc, la loi a été dite. Mais qu'est-ce qui se passe aujourd'hui? Comme je le disais tout à l'heure, il y a des réformes foncières qui sont en train de se passer. En 2012, au Sénégal, quand le président est arrivé, il a enclenché une réforme foncière. L'objectif, c'était quoi? C'était d'immatriculer toutes les terres du Sénégal, donc les terres du domaine national que je disais tout à l'heure, 95% appartiennent à la nation sénégalaise, où on n'a pas la possibilité, on ne peut pas la vendre, on ne peut pas la louer, on ne peut même pas la donner. On n'a qu'un droit d'usage sur ces terres parce que ça appartient à la nation sénégalaise, à ses générations et aux générations futures. Donc, l'objectif, c'était d'immatriculer toutes ces terres au nom de l'État du Sénégal et d'en faire, d'ouvrir un marché. Donc, qu'est-ce qu'on a vu en tant que société civile? Si on laisse ça passer, au bout de 5 ans, 10 ans, ces terres, 95% des terres du domaine national sénégalais vont se retrouver entre les mains des gens les plus riches. Donc, qu'est-ce qu'on a fait? On a mené un plaidoyer, on a organisé des rencontres avec les agro-pasteurs, avec les pêcheurs. Et ensemble, on a fait des propositions pour les dire que voilà ce qu'on veut. Voilà comment on veut que nos terres soient exploitées. Voilà ce qu'on veut laisser pour les générations futures. Aujourd'hui, par rapport à l'accès des femmes au foncier, il y a un grand travail qui est en train d'être fait au niveau local.
Ardo, if you can conclude.
Voilà. Il y a des actions qui sont en train d'être faites au niveau local parce qu'aujourd'hui, si les terres sont commercialisées, il y a un marché foncier qui est ouvert, qui est le plus perdant, c'est les jeunes, c'est les femmes qui vont perdre. Aujourd'hui, il y a un travail qui est en train d'être fait dans chaque pays, mais au niveau de la convergence globale ouest-africaine, on a un plaidoyer qui est en train d'être fait avec les chefs coutumiers au niveau de la sous-région africaine, parce qu'on a aussi des réalités africaines avec qui on doit aller ensemble pour mener le plaidoyer auprès de la CEDEAO. Donc ça, c'est quelque chose qui est en train d'être fait. L'autre chose, c'est qu'on est en train d'organiser des caravanes. Donc ça sera au mois de novembre 2021, octobre-novembre 2021, on va organiser la troisième caravane ouest-africaine qui va partir de la Gambie, passer par la Guinée-Bissau, la Guinée-Conakry et arriver en Sierra Leone. Donc, tous les pays de l'Afrique de l'Ouest vont participer pour ensemble mener un plaidoyer, faire des stops, discuter avec les paysans, parler avec les éleveurs pour qu'ensemble, qu'on puisse sécuriser, qu'on puisse laisser les ressources naturelles, les gens du monde rural occuper ces ressources naturelles, mais aussi laisser des ressources naturelles pour les générations futures, puisque nos grands-parents nous ont laissé ces ressources naturelles. Donc, voilà où je voulais terminer ma présentation. Merci beaucoup.
Okay, thanks very much, Ardo. That's very good news. So I want to move to Anna Shah. You talked about the negative impact of the kind of corporate investments in Brazil. And if you could speak a little bit more on what is actually the human impact of that at the local level on the communities you work with, on women, specific impacts. But in your 5 minutes, if I can also challenge you to speak about the relevance of the international instruments. I think we're having this debate about how relevant they are and whether they are of any use at all to the kinds of mass movements that you are part of, for example, the UN Declaration on the Rights of Peasants. So if you could address those two issues in 5 minutes, that would be great. Anna Cha, please.
Obrigada. É importante esse debate, né? A gente vinha dizendo que a nossa luta, ela é uma luta por reforma agrária, né, por distribuição de terras, mas também por soberania alimentar, por soberania dos povos, né? E para nós, a gente verifica que cada vez mais, e não é diferente do resto do mundo, os camponeses, eles vêm sendo ameaçados por essa lógica do avanço do agronegócio, né? No Brasil, imperam as grandes transnacionais do agronegócio que plantam baseado na monocultivo, na exportação, e isso afeta de sobremaneira os camponeses, que cada vez mais continuam sendo expulsos das suas terras, mas afeta também a população do modo geral, uma vez que, por exemplo, no momento de pandemia, tem feito subir o preço dos alimentos muito, impossibilitando, então, a grande maioria da população de se alimentar com qualidade. E no caso das populações que vivem nos campos, né, a gente tem visto que essa ofensiva, ela vem também através do Estado. Então, aqui no Brasil, inclusive, a Alonso estava comentando nos comentários, né, a gente tem vários projetos de lei tramitando para efetivamente retirar terras, por exemplo, dos povos indígenas. A gente tem projetos de lei tramitando para regularizar grilagem de terra, ou seja, apoderação de terras públicas, muitas delas por parte dos fazendeiros, e a gente está seguindo, então, nessa atuada de liberação, por exemplo, de regras ambientais para poder explorar aí a extração de madeira e de outro tipo de matérias-primas. Então, o que a gente quer reafirmar é que hoje se faz totalmente urgente e necessário um programa de reforma agrária, realizar uma reforma agrária, mas uma reforma agrária popular, que não trata apenas de distribuir terras, de produzir matéria-prima para a indústria, mas que pense principalmente essa perspectiva de produção de alimentos saudáveis, de soberania alimentar, de preservação ambiental e também de melhor organização, inclusive da vida urbana, né? Uma reforma agrária que seja um projeto de emancipação humana numa perspectiva econômica, social, política e cultural, né? Onde os bens comuns não sejam considerados mercadorias, mas sim patrimônio da humanidade. Então, que o campo seja visto como um lugar vivo. E, nesse aspecto, as mulheres têm um papel muito importante. Mas, como já foi dito aqui, ainda permanecemos aí baixo uma lógica de funcionamento patriarcal, numa dependência extrema das mulheres, então, em relação aí aos homens, do ponto de vista econômico mesmo. Então, a gente considera hoje que, muitas vezes, a gente precisa... em especial, dar conta de condições econômicas, dar conta de que as mulheres elas possam ter esse acesso à posse da terra para que, efetivamente, elas consigam sobreviver no campo e produzir como tão bem sabem fazer. A Declaração dos Direitos dos Camponeses, a gente considera que é um avanço importantíssimo, né? O fato de reconhecer, inclusive, os camponeses e as camponesas como sujeitos, de reconhecer os saberes da agricultura camponesa e essas formas de trabalhar e de cuidar da natureza. Agora, se a gente olhar para a nossa realidade Brasil, efetivamente, a declaração, que inclusive o Brasil se absteve de votar, ela não teve ainda nenhuma efetividade. Antes, pelo contrário, a gente continua vendo ameaças aos direitos dos camponeses, dos povos indígenas, dos extrativistas e poceiros. Mas a gente acredita muito que a declaração ela possa ser, sim, um instrumento, como dizia Ramesh, para a construção de políticas públicas a nível local e a nível nacional, né? A gente espera na América Latina, a gente vive diferentes processos, como a gente já dizia, mas que, por exemplo, a declaração ela possa inspirar, ela possa fazer parte de constituições que estão em andamento, como o caso do Chile, ela possa ser uma referência, uma inspiração para os governos progressistas, por exemplo, do Peru, e, em especial, que a gente possa também, através dos organismos internacionais, poder pressionar contra esse avanço desse saqueio dos recursos naturais por parte do capital. No Brasil, como eu dizia, a nossa luta é maior ainda. A gente precisa efetivamente derrubar esse governo para que a gente possa avançar na construção, então, dessas políticas públicas para a agricultura, né? tudo que a gente tinha conquistado do ponto de vista de fortalecimento da agricultura familiar e camponesa, de proteção ao meio ambiente, a cultura camponesa, a cultura alimentar, a gente praticamente perdeu tudo isso nesses poucos anos e a gente precisa efetivamente derrubar esse governo e manter os povos em articulação, em luta, para efetivamente a gente conseguir que a declaração, e não só a declaração, mas em especial que os direitos dos camponeses e das camponesas, eles prevaleçam. Muito obrigada.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Anna. That's a great goal, and we all support you in that. I think you have global support for that. I wanted to come back to Ana Maria on 2 points. One is this whole issue of green grabbing, which has become a growing global problem, and we haven't really addressed that. So how is this affecting local communities? And also, if you want to say a few more words on the UN Declaration on the Rights of Peasants, perhaps with some, there's this very sort of, in a sense, legitimate skepticism from Professor Cha and others about how powerful that can be when it's compared to trade agreements and the work being done by financial institutions. But perhaps you can give some examples where it has already made a difference. I think that might be helpful. So those 2 points, Ana Maria, please.
Thank you very much again, Milun. And I fully understand the skepticism of professors. So I would like to begin with this question, and then we go to the green grabbing. I fully agree that we need a change of the hegemonic neoliberal system. And we are seeing that the tension is out. And as one of the speakers said, in the UN Food System Summit debates, it's clear that we are in a moment of change of paradigm, and we don't know where are we going to. And in some way, it's easy to say we need to change the system, but to change the system, we need small steps. It's not just the will to change the system or the claim to change the system, which will change it, right? And in this sense, I think that in order to go to the system that we want, which is a system which puts the peasants, the indigenous peoples, the pastoralists, the fisher folks at the center, we can use these tools. And the declaration was just adopted at the end of 2018. So it's just 2 years of real implementation and in this context, right? But I want to mention some examples where people have used it. In Colombia, for example, even if we have this very difficult panorama at the national level, in some of the municipalities, the local action plans are being developed on the basis of UNDROP. And for example, in the country, even the national government decided to do a survey to define who are peasants in Colombia. And they used the definition that you have in the Article 1 of the declaration, which is very interesting because it's not just about farmers. We know that peasants are not just farmers. Farmers can be on the next days pastoralists, and maybe next month they are fishers, or the women dedicate to handicrafts. So it's a very plural and dynamic world. And for example, using this definition, they did the survey, and it's very important because peasants become visible, and the problems they have in accessing land become more visible. That does not solve the whole problem in one step, but it's a first step towards the solution of the problem, which is the recognition of those affected. Furthermore, we have also seen that in countries like Ecuador, women are being organized with the reason, the motivation of the implementation of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Peasants, together with the recommendation of CEDAW on rural women, to organize themselves and create strategies to advocate for the right to land and other related rights to local authorities, but also to their national authorities. And in some countries where already the transition to agroecology has begun, communities are using the UNDROP to try to impulse the needed policy and legal framework. So it's already being used by communities, and it's very nice that the declaration does not just serve as a legal tool to advocate, but it also serves as a tool to unify and bring convergences between the rural world. In other cases, for example, like in the Inter-American Human Rights Court or in the Committee on the Rights of the Child, UNDROP has been included by these legal operators to decide in favor of the affected communities. The case of La Cajonat in Argentina by the Inter-American Human Rights Court recognizes the rights of the communities using UNDROP, even if these are indigenous peoples. And in the CRC case, it's a case on pesticides. Also, the state is held responsible, including inter alia the UNDROP. I also want to say here, in defense of these international tools and mechanisms, that even if some say we can just change the things from the local, which is partially true, immediately when problems emerged, like in Brazil or in Colombia now with the strike that you probably have seen in the media, people say, okay, our governments do not hear us. So we need to use the international level, independently of how ineffective it is, etc., because this is the place where we can bring the attention of the world on our demands, including on land in Colombia, for example, on the implementation of the peace agreements, which includes a land reform. And just when the people speak from outside, we have the pressure from inside and from outside that will move our national government. So it's very important. And in this sense, I would just like to say that the way in which the right to land is conceived in the declaration is very important, because this is an anti-colonial one. It's not about the right to property. It's about the recognition of different ways of people to connect to land, which include also the customary tenure rights. And in this sense, people are organizing, including ensuring that communities are not divided. We know that transnational corporations, the first that they do is to divide communities so that people cannot keep together in the struggle. And then you can have the first declaration, treaties, whatever in the world. If people do not keep together, it's difficult to advance the struggles. They are also doing education. I know people from La Villa Campesina are here, and they can tell us more in the Q&As. There are some legal processes for the implementation on the declaration ongoing. And in these processes, it's not just the outcome what is interesting, the laws that come out, but also how the communities, the peasants' communities, organize around the processes. And of course, all the work in media that we can do around land reform, the impact on land, of investments and land grabbing on the landless, etc., can be very powerful, and we can connect that with the existing standards.
Ana Maria, if you can wrap up.
Sorry, to wrap up on the green grabbing, I just want to say
1 minute.
that this is sold as nature-based solutions, but what we see that is happening is that this grabbing is displacing the people from their lands on the excuse of fighting climate change and eco-destruction, but is fragmenting. And this fragmentation is really structurally violating the rights of people. And therefore, we have to be very careful to not confuse the false solutions put by corporations with the right solutions proposed by the peoples. And in the Q&A, we can go further on this.
Okay, thanks very much, Ana Maria. So, Rameshji, I'm going to request if you can wait to speak at the end. I think I wanted to announce that if it's all right with everyone, we'll go for another 25 to 30 minutes. And we now move into the question and answer session for the many participants who have been listening. I would request you to ask for the floor, and also please.
Yeah, please, Pilonji, go ahead.
Also, for those who want to speak, Please keep your questions and comments very brief. We have quite a lot of people who are listening and we want to give everybody a chance. And if you do have a question for a particular panelist, please identify them. But otherwise, again, please keep it brief. I think there was also a question in the question tab, and there have been some issues in the chats, but perhaps Gyan can bring those up. Let's start with go ahead, Gyan.
Yeah, no, Milo, if I can just, sorry, because I've been collating some of the questions. So if we could start with you, Mr. Ardo, if that would be okay. I have some questions and some comments on your presentation. So Jean-Christophe in the chat says that he agrees with you regarding the importance.
Juste un élément. On s'est engagé auprès des traductrices qui ont bien voulu assurer l'exercice de la traduction simultanée de ce webinaire. La discussion ne durerait pas plus d'1h30. Elles sont une seule personne pour chaque langue et c'est un exercice très difficile à mener sur plus d'1h30. C'est un grand maximum. D'habitude, elles travaillent 1 heure d'affilée. Donc, il faut d'ores et déjà excuser, je crois que c'est Mayra qui s'est exprimée à l'instant, qui ne peut pas continuer l'exercice en français. On était prévenu, on avait dit qu'il ne fallait pas dépasser 1h30 malheureusement. Donc je comprends l'intérêt de continuer la discussion, mais il faut aussi comprendre la nécessité de respecter les conditions de travail de nos traductrices qui ont bien voulu nous aider aujourd'hui. Donc si les autres traductrices acceptent de continuer un peu, on les en remercie vivement, mais ce n'est pas obligé, on comprendra très bien. Et je propose qu'on continue les discussions en essayant d'user de nos capacités à comprendre les langues en présence.
Je peux juste demander vite fait, Mathieu, on peut encore continuer 10 minutes, c'était ça ou pas?
Pour faire...
Avec la traduction, on peut encore continuer 10 minutes, non?
Qu'est-ce que vous en pensez, Mayra, Brilla et Rosita? Est-ce que c'est possible 10 minutes? Oui, je vous entends. Oui, mais je comprends très bien, je comprends tout à fait. Non, mais vous êtes tout excusé.
Oh, je propose qu'on continue en faisant une traduction en anglais. Une traduction consécutive, hein?
Je comprends très bien.
Mathieu, je propose qu'on continue sans la traduction, mais en faisant nous-mêmes une traduction en anglais.
Christian, qu'est-ce que tu dis?
Je propose qu'on continue en faisant nous-mêmes la traduction consécutive en anglais.
Vers le français. Ou tout en anglais, tu veux dire?
Non, les gens parlent dans leur langue, on traduit en anglais.
D'accord. Alors, il faudra qu'on se répartisse les rôles là, parce que...
Alors, moi, je peux faire la traduction en anglais. Donc,
we can hear you, yeah.
On a déjà perdu 5 minutes, alors.
Oui, allez-y.
Okay. Yeah, I understand. Ana Maria is jumping in kindly in the chat with Spanish. If anybody wants to have a look at the chat, I think we'll just continue and we'll see where we get. Okay, perfect. Thanks a lot. All right. So I was Mr. Ardo. Are you still there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, perfect. So there was a comment for you, Jean-Christophe, in the chat. He said he'd agreed with you regarding the importance of demography in land talks and in the land issue. And one of the biggest issues in the Mekong region, he says, perhaps he's from there, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, and Myanmar, is demographic growth and the need for land for future generations. And this has not been factored into the making of redistributive and distributive land policy. so in government policy. And this has been, the fact that this hasn't been factored in has been very problematic for current and future generations of farmers. So this was Jean-Christophe in the chat. I will just read out some more as well for you, Mr. Ardo. There's one more from Jean-Christophe again. No, sorry, from Isa. She says, thanks a lot for your presentation, Mr. So. The Senegalese approach seems interesting to me when we know that in some countries where land belongs to family communities, they tend to sell it off. As a result, younger generations find themselves without land. There isn't really a question. These are just comments on your presentation. I think it was very well received, Mr. Ardo.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
Gian,
you.
can I suggest that we take some more comments and then the panelists can have a few minutes to answer?
Yeah, I mean, I have some on the document. Sorry.
It's only comments, no, it's not questions, so it's okay.
Yeah. Right now they're comments, as far as I can tell.
But there may be some people who are listening who also want to speak, so perhaps we can give them a chance.
Yeah.
Is there anyone who's listening who would like to ask a question or make a comment?
So
I think, Mr. Harimanga wanted to speak, and maybe Alonso.
Okay, we have 4 people who are asking to speak, I believe, on the attendee chat. I'll just unmute Mr. Harimanga to start with. Mr. Harimanga, you can now unmute yourself and pose your question. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup de m'avoir donné la parole. Moi, j'ai posé la question sur cette lacune des droits fondamentaux, des textes fondamentaux sur le droit de l'homme. Mais il y a déjà la Déclaration des Nations Unies sur les droits des paysans et paysannes et les personnes vivant en milieu rural là, mais ça reste toujours dans la déclaration. Il y a aussi le directive volontaire de la gouvernance responsable de la terre et des ressources naturelles, mais tout ça reste toujours dans le domaine de la déclaration. Mais comment va-t-on pallier tout ça pour que les paysans et les paysannes puissent jouir vraiment leur droit à la terre, mais pas seulement le droit foncier, mais le droit à la terre, donc l'accès à la terre pour qu'ils pourraient vivre dans l'aisance. J'ai encore pas mal de questions et pas mal je veux exprimer, mais je vais attendre mon tour en tant que panéliste pour le deuxième panel, deuxième réunion là.
Merci. Donc, il y a qui des panélistes qui voudraient prendre cette question?
C'est quoi la question? On l'a pas bien entendu, le micro, ça sonnait un peu trop fort là.
Ok, on peut répéter. Vous pouvez répéter la question, Monsieur Harimanga?
In summary form.
No, the question is about the fact that land rights are not recognized in the official human rights declaration. So Mr. Harimanga is asking how they can be more effectively recognized.
Okay, I see Ana Maria with the raised hand. So go on, Ana Maria.
Yeah. What I understand is that he is concerned because the UN Declaration on the Rights of Peasants and the voluntary guidelines on land tenure are non-binding instruments, right? It's voluntary, and then he is asking, okay, how can we do if this is not obligatory to ensure that we can enforce these rights? And of course, and retaking what has been said many times, it depends of how people organize and make political pressure. But in some cases, for example, we can take the declaration as a way to interpret the existing obligations of states for example, under the Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. And in this sense, we can make, as lawyers used to do, make the turn to ensure that we connect existing rights, like the right to dignified life, like the right to food, the right to housing, with the right to land, recognized in the declaration, and through that, we could defend some legal cases. We need to be very creative as lawyers, but I think that would be the way for the legal part, taking into account that this requires people to be organized, to put the political pressure for it, and we need to have some allies within the UN system. And I think that we have some of the current special rapporteurs that are supporting, like the one on the right to food. And also, as you know, might know, the Committee on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights is writing a general comment on land and ESCR, and they will recognize the right to land for peasants, not as a universal right, but for peasants and for indigenous peoples. So this begins to create the legal space for it.
Also, if I can just add, the history has been that the so-called non-binding instruments, or often called soft law, have actually been used in courts as legal instruments. So we have many cases with the guiding principles on internal displacement, with the forced evictions guidelines, which have, so actually when it comes to courts or it comes to policies or laws, that distinction is not made. And I think we need to remember that. And the same is beginning to happen with UNDROP, as Anna Maria was saying. So let's not, get too saddened if we say it's a non-binding, but non-binding can also have a very major impact. Yeah, go ahead.
Quelqu'un peut traduire en français?
We have...
Attends, peut-être quelqu'un peut traduire en français ou en... Je ne sais pas. La réponse? Bon, moi, je peux essayer en deux phrases de manière très synthétique. Oui, les droits récents, les reconnaissances des droits des paysans, ce n'est pas un instrument obligatoire, mais ça a quand même un impact à partir du moment où il y a une pression politique, d'une part, une mobilisation politique, et d'autre part, les juristes peuvent utiliser ces références et les lier à d'autres droits. Et finalement, au niveau de la justice, quelquefois, la différence n'est pas si flagrante que ça. Donc, il ne faut pas désespérer de ces droits. Même s'ils ne sont pas obligatoires, ils permettent quand même de faire la différence. Mais il faut toujours qu'il y ait une pression politique, disons, de la base. Sinon, évidemment, rien ne se passe.
Thank you, Christian. We have Alonso, who is waiting in the queue as well. I'm just giving you the mic now. Alonso, you can pose your question. Alonso, can you hear us? Okay, I'm going to move on to Jacques, who also wanted to pose a question. Go ahead, Jacques, you're unmuted.
Então, na verdade, bom dia a todos e todas. Não chega a ser uma pergunta, mas essa partilha das preocupações da disputa dos territórios, né, que a gente vem colocando aqui nos comentários, ela tem se acirrado aqui no Brasil, tanto com estratégias tanto do Poder Executivo, por parte do Presidente da República, mas também com a base de apoio no Congresso Nacional, no Poder Legislativo, de dificultar o acesso à terra, a luta pela terra, e também de demarcação de território dos povos tradicionais, dos povos indígenas. E além de dificultar o acesso, a gente tem uma tentativa de retirada daqueles territórios que já estão demarcados, né? Então, o que nós estamos vivendo é um momento não só de retrocesso, mas de ameaça de retirada daquilo que a gente já tinha conquistado. Então, essa articulação internacional que o fórum, que esse coletivo aqui se propõe, ele é muito importante, é muito desafiador, no momento em que nós temos pessoas hoje no poder que ele não reconhece os organismos internacionais, inclusive, e que faz de tudo para poder fazer o ataque aos grupos chamados grupos minoritários. Então, eu já tinha levantado uma questão no fórum de lançamento, no seminário de lançamento, era de como que a gente articula os espaços dos parlamentos, como o Parlamento do Mercosul, o Parlasul ou o Parlamento Europeu, para ter iniciativas legislativas ou desses espaços para tentar forçar os poderes locais, os estados nacionais, a cumprirem com suas obrigações e a cumprirem com os acordos internacionais. Porque a gente tem muitos ataques nessa perspectiva. Para além desses que nós falamos, há uma proposta de iniciativa também legislativa para que a gente não precise, aqui no Brasil, cumprir com o acordo da Convenção 69 da OIT. Então, como que a gente avança com esses espaços institucionais, como nos parlamentos, principalmente nos parlamentos, como um instrumento, uma ferramenta nossa da classe trabalhadora, sabe? Eu acho que isso a gente teria que, nesses 6 meses agora de discussão, pensar numa estratégia de como incidir nesses espaços.
I can translate if you want.
Yes, it would be nice. Thank you.
Just a minute. I have it in Spanish in the chat, and now I will try to translate into English. So he says that regarding the concerns in the different remarks, he wants to tell us that in Brazil they are developing a strategy to
Ana Maria, sorry, we have English interpretation right now. We don't have the other languages.
Sorry.
English we have. Okay. But thank you so much.
Then the Spanish is in the chat.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Bon, je peux en français, en très résumé. Donc, Alonso témoigne qu'actuellement au Brésil, il y a une grande attaque contre les droits des agriculteurs et des communautés, en particulier des communautés indigènes, avec le Congrès national et le gouvernement qui sont en train de faire passer des lois pour remettre en question des droits déjà acquis et remettre en question des droits des communautés. Donc, pour eux, c'est important d'avoir pensé à des alliances internationales pour lutter contre ces tendances. Et ils proposent de réfléchir à la manière de mettre en lien les différents parlements, à la fois au Mercosul et l'Union européenne, pour que les parlements fassent pression sur le Parlement brésilien, par exemple, pour qu'il respecte un peu ses engagements internationaux. Voilà, en très résumé.
Merci beaucoup.
Il y a encore une question qui est posée, elle est sur le chat, mais je ne sais pas si vous voulez la poser vous-même. Michel Merlet, je peux vous donner la parole. Ouais, c'est à vous.
Merci, oui, j'ai très rapidement ébauché une question. Moi, je suis un peu étonné de voir que ce qu'on entend aujourd'hui ressemble énormément à ce qu'on avait déjà discuté il y a 20 ans à Porto Alegre au premier Forum social mondial. Hein, et il y a un certain nombre de choses un peu nouvelles qui sont apparues, mais dans l'ensemble, on reste un peu sur les mêmes observations. Et on n'a eu aucune analyse critique des propositions qui ont été faites par le passé et mises en œuvre depuis 100 ou 120 ans, disons, hein, en particulier au niveau des réformes agraires. On ne s'est jamais demandé pourquoi est-ce que les réformes agraires qui ont réellement été mises en œuvre dans le monde depuis 100 ans n'ont pas permis de dépasser le capitalisme et d'arriver à un régime communiste ou socialiste, hein, mais en général l'ont au contraire renforcé. Bon, les deux plus beaux exemples, c'est celui de l'Union soviétique, hein, qui a été la meilleure moyen de promouvoir un capitalisme agraire effréné, hein, et celui de la Chine, où la réforme agraire efficace a finalement permis de construire un capitalisme parmi les plus agressifs qu'on peut trouver aujourd'hui, qui n'est certes pas rural, hein, mais qui est au niveau de la sphère industrielle et puis des échanges en général. Hein, donc, par rapport à tout ça, moi, il me semble que dans notre séminaire, là, il va falloir absolument se poser la question de savoir pourquoi est-ce que ces choses-là n'ont pas marché. Et alors qu'il y a de moins en moins de paysans et de plus en plus de travailleurs agricoles qui n'ont plus de lien à la terre, et de plus en plus de gens dans les villes, comment est-ce qu'on va pouvoir avoir les rapports de force pour pouvoir continuer à changer les rapports à la terre? Hein, donc je pense qu'il n'y a pas moyen de pouvoir continuer à utiliser les mêmes slogans. La réforme agraire populaire au Brésil, aujourd'hui, personne ne votera la réforme agraire populaire au Brésil, puisque 80% des gens sont dans les villes. Et finalement, la question agraire, ce n'est pas tellement leur problème. Leur problème, c'est d'avoir des aliments pas trop chers, hein, et d'avoir un minimum de qualité de vie dans les villes. Hein, donc, je pense qu'il y a vraiment des questions de fond qu'il faut se poser, et ces questions, elles passent par la remise en cause des schémas de développement agricole qui ont été mis en place par, en particulier, des régimes socialistes et aussi, bien sûr, les régimes capitalistes, mais qui, dans l'ensemble, ont été moins agressifs vis-à-vis de leur paysanat que les régimes communistes.
Merci, Michel. I think we've lost English translation, so I'll just try and recap quickly what Michel says. He's saying that. Oh, okay. Yeah. We couldn't hear you. So.
But we couldn't hear the English translation. Sorry.
He's stopped speaking, Brila. Okay. Anyway, it's fine. I'll just translate this quickly then. So what he says, what Michel says, is that a lot of what we've discussed during this webinar, he's already heard similar slogans, similar positions, similar points 20 years ago at the World Social Forum in Porto Alegre. So for him, it's really necessary that we kind of change our thinking around this issue, particularly with increasing urbanization around the world. And he gives the example of Brazil, where he says that increasing urbanization and changing living standards and more people wanting a particular type of life in the cities, shall we say, means that they will not vote for the kind of vote for politicians, maybe a vote for change necessarily at a more rural level. So he urges more of an exploration, basically, or maybe a change in thinking, as opposed to how we used to treat this issue 20 plus years ago. Okay. Okay. Over to you now, Milun, for a wrap up, because we have to finish, I'd say, in the next 5 minutes, if that's okay with everyone.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much, Gyan, for managing that question answer. I had a few points to make, but I think it may be very useful given the different levels of experience. If Rameshji, if you could conclude in 5 minutes, and then we can talk about the next steps.
Milunji, I would say, Milunji, let's share 2.5 minutes.
Okay. Okay. I think what we heard today are two what you can call almost divergent points, where there's a lot of sort of almost depression at the rapid level of the loss of land-based resources and the increase in land grabbing. But on the other hand, we also heard that there are attempts being made at the international level and many national levels to promote land rights, and also the work at the UN has not stopped. There are attempts being made to have land recognized as a human right, and as some of you may know, there's also very active discussions going on a binding treaty on transnational corporations and human rights. And of course, we all want the big change, but I think the point Anna Maria made, that small steps are important, and there is incremental change that is taking place. Now the question is whether that is going to keep pace with the negative dimensions that have been raised. And I also wanted to say that the Brazil reality may be much more urbanization, but in India and many countries in sub-Saharan Africa, we still have very large rural populations. So I think there is still hope for that kind of land reform. And I think we have to see this as a first step. There's going to be, in this larger forum, there's going to be more discussions. And I think the fact that so many people have come together at the global level again and continue to work across nations and across regions is a very, very, very positive aspect. So I just wanted to conclude on that optimistic note. Rameshji, please.
Yeah, thanks, Milun. I want to take where you have actually ended. Yes, there is a lot of positive things is also happening around us. If I compare the land movement 20 years back versus the land movement today, spreading over across the country and across the world, there's more and more movement is actually emerging, believing in different ideologies, using different strategies, and doing a different sorts of campaign. So I can also see, being a land activist, I can also see, apart from all those challenges, there are some successes in every countries and in every continent. Slowly, some governments are also recognizing the land policies and the different land legislations. I mean, take example of Forest Rights Act in India, which actually came after 20 years of long struggle on the ground. And finally, the indigenous community, they have right to claim or reclaim their forest territories. So as I said, that there are some successes and there are some opportunities too. But let me tell an interesting point. I mean, I'm a part of a global knowledge hub, which was set up by the UN Food Summit. So on the other day, when we had a discussion, I raised this question: is there any way to secure the food systems without recognizing the land tenure and without recognizing the agrarian reforms? So this could be a one central questions in the coming months, in the coming weeks. And if all of us, we start raising this as a central issue, probably we can change the entire discourse rather than the all nutrition specific discussion or nutrition centric discussion to the land reforms as a basic questions around the food systems. So I can see this as an opportunity, but let me recall what on the other day Professor Jha has said, that there is a high time for us to rethink about the representation as a way out, especially in the post-COVID new normal or new abnormal world. And why it's important? Because this is the only way to sustain the family economy or the farm economy of the 2/3 of the poor population, the landless population, who'd like to see a better world tomorrow. I'm sure before ending the global promise of 2030. So in conclusion, I would say that, there are four very important points. The first is land to the landless and homeless population is the only way to secure the life and livelihood of democratic majority in the world. The second point, which actually I draw through discussion, is the urgency to change the economic model and political projects in order to halt the massive resource grab in the name of development. The third conclusion I have actually drawn after the speakers, it's the women and youth must be among the topmost priority for the land redistribution process in the future. And the fourth is commons strictly need to be protected for the common future of the commons. So thanks Milunji, thanks to Anacha, thanks to Anamaria, thanks to Professor Jha, thanks to Erdo, thanks to Gyan, Matthew and Christine, and a very, very special thanks to Milunji for conducting this very, very interesting and discussion. In coming weeks, we'll continue this discussion until the mid of July. And I'm sure when we reach to the final day of this 1 month long conversation, we'll definitely get some more hope, more energy for the future struggle. So thanks to all of you again on behalf of the organizing committee.
Thank you, Ramesh. I think Gyan has...
Yeah, you should be able to see Christian's screen here. So this is the homepage of our discussion. So our thematic we're operating within the Forum of Struggles for Land and Natural Resources. This is our discussion. And so you find it on the site under the specific tab of our discussion. And you see the red button, that's where you register. There's also various other places on the website. And what Christian is showing you here is our discussion space. And it operates in various formats. So you can post a message, you can post an audio message, you can post a photo, you can post a document. And it'll be running throughout our thematic. So from today till the 14th of July. And yeah, we welcome discussion, debate, and we hope to have your enthusiastic participation on the site. We've put the link for the site, I think, many times in the chat already. But anyway, we'll be sending out mass emails with the link if anyone needs it. I just wanted to say quickly that our second webinar is on the 2nd of July. And it's stories from the ground. So what we're presenting, what we're calling on activists, on particularly land rights activists from around the world, from four continents actually, with experience at the local level, at the grassroots level, fighting for land rights, fighting for land reform, coming up with policies for land governments, fighting against landlesses, of course. So that's our second webinar on the 2nd of July. If you've already registered on our site, you will automatically get the Zoom link. And as I said before, if you haven't, please consider registering. And our final webinar for this thematic is on the 14th of July. We're calling it the way forward. We'll have some very prominent experts in the field of land rights, particularly from the International Land Coalition and from Landless, who'll be talking to us about what they make of the current state of land rights in the world, what steps they see moving forward, how we can better sort of coalesce together, form coalitions, form alliances to strengthen our position in the space. And again, if you've registered, you automatically get the link. If not, please consider doing so. And I wanted to thank everyone very much, the panelists, the translation help, very much appreciated, Ana Maria, thank you. And of course, all the attendees. It's been a great session. And yeah, I don't know if there was anything else, Milun or Ramesh.
No, thanks a lot, Kian. I also that if the chat could be made available, I think that might be helpful. But there's some very interesting and very useful websites and question answers. So
yeah, we will try
that
to
can
see
be put on the website.
If we can pull the data from the chat. Yeah.
And thanks a lot to all.
We will also be putting a recording of the entire session in case on our website. So.
Okay, excellent. Okay. So thanks very much, everyone. It's been very good. I know we ran out of time, but I think we covered a lot of ground, and perhaps we'll have a little more time for the next two panels. So thanks very much, everyone, and have a good day.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Very nice meeting.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci a tous. Muito obrigado. Gracias a todos.
Gracias a todos. Un abrazo.
Un abrazo. Ciao.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Ian, for all the
yeah. Thanks so much for sticking around, Brila. I know we went over time, but thank you so much.
Don't worry, I am used. In many times I end up being the interpreter. You know?
No, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Bye.
Okay.
Take care, bye.
Thank you very much and congratulations. It was very interesting. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Fanny, tu nous entends?
Oui, on t'entend.
Fanny, tu t'es déconnecté ou tu... Bon.
Christian, tu parles à moi ou quoi?
Oui, je te demandais si tu étais toujours là. Et donc,
non, je suis toujours là, mais il va falloir que j'aille livrer des merguez et vous quitter.
Très bien.
On fera le point bientôt?
Oui.
Ouais, profite bien de cette possibilité de te déconnecter.
Ouais. Livrer des merguez, c'est pas très rigolo, mais bon, il faut le faire.
Oui, mais enfin, c'est du direct, c'est du vivant.
Ouais. Du vivant
oui.
haché. Mais à bientôt et on fera le point. Ouais, ça vaut le coup de faire le point pour le prochain. Là.
Oui, oui. Et donc, attends, Fanny, juste une petite seconde.
Oui, vas-y.
Il faut absolument que vous réagissiez sur les propositions d'intervenants pour les 2 prochains webinaires et en particulier alors le deuxième, il était attendu un témoignage sur l'Europe. Je crois que Federico a indiqué un ami du SAT pour s'exprimer au.
Moi, je trouverais ça super, hein, du
Ouais.
SOC SAT. Je trouve que ça a du sens par rapport à la question des sans-terre. Mais en fait,
Après,
nous, Confédération Paysanne, faut qu'on en parle en interne parce on se sent pas légitime de parler de sans-terre par rapport à nos questionnements et du coup, on sait pas comment aborder le truc, quoi.
Ouais. Et alors l'autre séminaire, c'est celui de conclusion. Là, qui prend la figure aussi d'une invitation de figures comme ça, d'experts. Il faut que la voix des membres du COPIL soit présente. Il y a un enjeu de faire la synthèse des échanges et aussi de dégager des lignes pour la suite. Et Federico, par exemple, a dit qu'il voyait ça pas intéressant. Il n'y avait pas d'opposition de principe parce qu'il y ait Michael Taylor, qui est le directeur de l'International Land Coalition, qui s'exprime. Mais il faudrait qu'il y ait quelqu'un de Via Campesina, il faudrait que le CVC, tu vois.
Ouais, carrément.
Donc,
oui,
voilà,
mais du coup, quand même, en fait, moi, je pense qu'il faut que, parce qu'on part un peu dans tous les sens sur la question du foncier et par rapport à la question des sans-terre vraiment particulièrement, peut-être qu'il faut qu'on se redonne un peu des définitions, tout ça, pour qu'on sache comment. Enfin, nous, on est un peu à court et je pense qu'on parle pas forcément des mêmes choses. Alors que je pense qu'il y a un problème de vocabulaire, mais il suffirait qu'on ait une discussion là-dessus, peut-être, pour que nous, on se sente plus légitime à parler de tout ça, quoi. Et entre autres, au niveau européen.